This is a carpenter ant queen, and I will be taking care of her so she can build a colony of many large carpenter ants. Please watch till the end. This queen was massive, being at least an inch long, and I heard that the workers can be up to a centimeter or more. This carpenter ant species is called the black carpenter ant, and its scientific name is Camponotus modoc. But wait, let's get to the story of how this queen even got here. It was early spring when a massive 83 degrees Fahrenheit heat wave occurred in our climate. I wasn't expecting a carpenter ant queen to fly so early in spring, and even though it did fly, I didn't think it would land here. Here's why. Many carpenter ants were living near my house in parks and public areas, but since last year, I haven't seen any near my place. Many of them migrated to forest-like areas, such as hikes far away from my home. They do this in search of food, creating temporary satellite nests for the time being. Although carpenter ants may seem big and strong to fly around, they mostly fly for a quarter of a mile, but the chances are rare when it flies for a mile or more. Once I placed the queen ant into the test tube, she was calm, not what I was expecting, and only made slight positions of her body. It is genius, since she is regulating dryness and humidity. In this case, her head is away from the water source, meaning she is regulating herself due to temperature. I also noticed that the cotton of the tube was being pulled, and this means that she is customizing the test tube as her own royal chamber. These were all great signs that the carpenter ant queen was fertilized. I will leave her for weeks, only checking on her once every few days. I will come back checking on her at day 5 to see her progress. It is now day 5 and shockingly, the queen has 5 eggs in total. She is even tending to them as she holds a clump of eggs in her jaw. This will most likely result in the fertile queen, and I say mostly for a reason. Even though she has laid eggs, there is a slight chance that the eggs may not be fertilized. Let me explain. There is a gene called haplodiplomacy where infertile eggs will become male ants in the process of parthenogenesis. Therefore, this process allows eggs with no sperm to be created into male ants. These ants, however, do not help out around the colony and just sit and do not do work, resulting in a failed colony. In mature colonies, the queen will determine to lay an infertile egg to become male ants or a fertile egg to become female ants. When I looked back at the queen, I noticed that there were some very dark blue fragments of mold. This could be mold spores forming in the ant queen's water source. I have had deep encounters of mold growing in other colony species I filmed off camera. Therefore, the mold infected many of my past colonies such as pavement ants and Lasius ants. It infected and spreaded to the mold and even killed the queen. I wouldn't have to worry about this until it becomes a serious problem and I'll have to manually move the queen into a different test tube. When I opened the test tube to check on the queen's progress, I was happy to see that the eggs have been converted into tiny larvae. These larvae are the second stage of being a fully grown ant, and since the larvae were almost as small as a grain of rice, I knew that these larvae had just hatched. Notice the colors of the exoskeleton of the larvae. Notice how the mouth parts of the larvae are transparent and the bottom side is dark yellow. The whole body of the larvae is very transparent, and the yellow part of the body is actually its stomach. This means that the larvae were being fed something yellow. This made sense because carpenter ant queens are fully cholesterol during their founding process, aka the start of her colony. She does this in order to feed the larvae as well as herself, which makes it possible for her to survive for months in the test tube. Her wing tissues used in her nuptial flights are transformed into ant food, stored in her thorax. From there, she will begin to feed larvae through a process called trophallaxis, a process that makes ants regurgitate nutrients through each other to sustain every ant. I checked the tube in the afternoon and confused, the larvae were still the same size as the last time I checked it. There were more eggs, but the larvae were still quite the same size. I have a couple reasons for this. Number 1. Carpenter ants are huge and take longer to develop than most 3-meter long ants. By this
But
stage,
since carpenter
my
ants
pavement
take
ant
longer
colony
to develop,
is already in
they
the
remain
adult
the
larvae
similar
stage
size
until the middle of its growth, where it actually increases by the week. Just like bamboo shoots. When you have to wait for years for a shoot to appear, then it skyrockets into a foot length a day. Number 2. Camponotus modoc, our carpenter ant queen's scientific name, likes heated temperatures. Broods develop the fastest around 85 to 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Any more could possibly harm my precious ants. I thought of leaving the tube in a hot room, but none of the rooms seemed to be the right temperature. Then I thought of an idea. What if I used a heating mat used for my colony of pavement ants known as the pavement raiders and put my carpenter ant queen there? It was the perfect temperature, and I had a feeling this might be the right step to make. The heating mat will radiate warmth to both the pavement raiders and my carpenter ant queen. This was a genius idea. I put the edge of the tube on the heating mat. I put it on the edge in case of overheating, and overheating means that the cotton ball blocking the water source would condense and flood the nest, which is what we don't want to happen. In my theory, the queen will notice the heat and move her brood at that heat source. I come back an hour later, and lo and behold, the queen tending to her brood at the edge of the test tube at the heat source. The queen knows that the heat makes her feel comfortable and wants her brood to feel the same way in order to develop faster. Meanwhile, I checked the blue mold on the cotton and it was getting bigger. It was now or never. I had to move the queen. So on day 20, I got prepared for the queen to be transferred. I got ready a counterpart test tube and taped it to the entrance of the queen's chamber. Now I had to focus a bright light at the queen's original chamber to make her have extreme discomfort and cause her to potentially move. Then I made the counterpart nest dark and comfortable, which is what the queen would probably want. Now, time to play the most painful game, in my opinion, the waiting game. As the queen started to notice the fresh smell of a new home, she became curious of what it was, still being super protective of her own young. She sometimes edged closer and closer, but had second thoughts of what could happen. Then she got over herself and made the very risky trip to explore the counterpart test tube. I was very excited and thought that she would move her brood into the new spot, but she never did. This may seem like a short process for you guys, but trust me, I've been sitting here for a whole hour. I caught off most of the boring footage of this process. I was afraid that if I left, the queen was going to move. I came back 30 minutes later, and what did I say? The queen moved. Ants are some really interesting beings, and even though carpenter ants have a bad render distance of eyesight, I always feel like this one can see me. Now, she is happily settled in her new nesting chamber that is mold-free. On day 25, the brood has more than doubled in size. It looks like the queen is feeding to this one particular larvae, as it is way bigger than the other ones. This one will probably be the first one to become a worker ant. I also noticed that the queen's abdomen was way skinnier than before, which means she was actually feeding it her own tissues. It looks like the heating method worked, and as I predicted, the brood would increase in size dramatically every day. The reason why she is feeding only one is because she is starving and she needs to create the one worker who can supply her with her only food. What's interesting is that if we take a look of this particular footage, It looks like there is a white leg in the brood pile. And I don't know what this is, so if you guys know, then feel free to let me know what this thing is, because I don't even know it. I had left the queen for 2 months now and checked to see some progress. However, once I opened it, I was shocked to see that there were no worker ants. The ant with wings is a male ant, which means the queen isn't fertile. You may be thinking, what do you mean it's not fertilized? The queen just gave birth to a live ant. But ants have some type of weird gene that lets male eggs be unfertilized and female eggs are very fertilized. I was sad about the queen not being fertilized, and I also had big plans for the queen's colony in the future. It was okay though, at least the queen gave birth to a male ant. This colony would not survive longer since males do not work at all. They simply wait until their nuptial flight to take off. I also seen the queen lay 2 more eggs. These eggs would become males, but there was a very small % chance that it would be females. All in all, I will be keeping this colony just in case of signs of fertilization, but otherwise I will see ya.